Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, where every week we talk about how technology is transforming the creative industries. Today on the program, Nike's new NFT platform Swoosh and what that means for the future of digital fashion. We will talk about why NFTs seem to be thriving when crypto doesn't, our legacy brands, the way forward for digital assets, the role for community in the digital fashion space, and Instagram's new NFT platform and other examples in this space. Big topic, very interesting one, very topical. I'm Konrad, Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm here with returning panelist Roland, Philippe, Kretzschmar, our editor-at-large, and our junior editor, Erik, Sedin. Guys, good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be back.
Morning.
It's December 1st when we are recording this, and it feels like Christmas is around the corner. Everyone's super busy with wrapping up the year. And
speaking of that, I have to ask, since we're a tech podcast, we're very, up to date, we're staying in the know. How did your Spotify unwrap look like? Speaking of wrapped.
I haven't even gone there. I feel like it's the same thing every year. So that's why I feel like I'm growing older. It looks the same every year. Roland, how about you?
I haven't looked at it yet, actually, so I will do that afterwards.
Okay, good.
Thank you for that, Erik. So today we're going to talk about Nike's new Web3 platform called Swoosh. This was launched announced 2 weeks ago, and it's been kind of slowly rolling out ever since. And we're going to talk about this today for several reasons. One of them is if you look at, the crypto space at a glance, if you're anyone, remotely close to crypto or NFTs, you know that crypto is having quite a hard time right now. Bitcoin is less than half of what it was 1 year ago. There's news every week about sort of crypto billionaires either being disappeared, found dead, or, as in the case of Sam Bankman-Fried, and his bankrupted platform FTX. There's crazy news about real estate in Bahamas, and this unregulated space has created quite a shit show. But sort of adjacent to that is the whole notion of NFTs, and obviously it's been something we've been talking about quite extensively on this podcast for well over a year. And what's interesting is that seems to be thriving quite a lot. There are many activities, many projects launching, and in the case of Nike, a big global brand making a dedicated push into this space. And we're going to talk about what this is. We're going to talk about what this could mean for the future of digital fashion. So let's try to unpack this a little bit. Roland, you were the first one who sort of brought this to our attention. Very excited in our Slack feed, but also on your social. Why were you so excited about this launch when it arrived?
Let's give it a backdrop. What is Swoosh? Well, it's a Web3 platform for co-creation and community-driven design, right? So we will explain a bit more in detail what that means. But the thing is, we can go back to 1999. When Nike launched Nike ID. You could already, 20 plus years ago, design your own sneakers with Nike ID. So for 20 years, Nike has collected data, vast amounts of data, on the appetite of design, what designs are the most popular. And, this has been one of the core elements of Nike's success. And after Nike ID, all the competitors started their own similar platforms. I think the main difference is that now Nike will actually offer consumers the opportunity to get revenues on their designs. And we actually don't know yet the details of how that will work in practice. All we know is that Swoosh is this Polygon-based co-creation platform where consumers can design their own sneakers, and that might result in virtual sneakers that can be traded, but it might also result in physical sneakers that might be traded. And the idea of using blockchain technology and Polygon as a crypto platform is that consumers would then also get revenues. That is the big thing here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I need to add another element to why I was so excited is that because, I mean, not only did Nike start this kind of experiment of allowing consumers to design their sneakers 20 years ago, they actually were very early in the NFT space. So already 3 years ago, they started to experiment with NFTs. They first collaborated with Artifact and acquired Artifact. And actually, Nike has generated close to 200 million in sales from NFTs, dollars, $200 million. And the the aftermarket volume of Nike NFTs is $1.2 billion. So, and just as a comparison, Adidas has generated 10 times lower sales on NFTs.
Yeah.
So Nike has this amazing head start, but I think they also have this this notion of co-creation with the community, with consumers. It's embedded into their DNA.
Let's go back.
So that's just my quick take on it. Yeah.
We'll go back to. I want to unpack several of those issues that you just talked about. So let's just go back and see how Nike is describing this themselves.
Yeah.
So they're launching .swoosh, and Swoosh is obviously the name of their logo. .swoosh is a Web3 enabled platform that champions athletes and serves the future of sport by creating a new inclusive digital community and experience and a home for Nike's virtual creations. I think that says a lot. So the domain is swoosh.nike. I didn't even know they had their own kind of .com. There's a .nike.
I read that was because of safety reasons, because that will be harder for people to scam other NFTs.
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
.nike, yeah.
At this place, they will, as you alluded to, Roland, we'll be able to sort of learn about, collect, and eventually help co-create these virtual creations. Typically interactive digital objects, but they also say it could be sort of phygital objects. We've talked about this before, meaning, I would imagine NFTs or blockchain controlled designs that could also be a physical shoe. It should be noted also, you mentioned they're buying Artifact. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but Artifact was a French digital-only sneaker brand that launched, it's going to be 2 years ago now. And it's during the rise of sort of NFTs and digital fashion, the notion of digital fashion, which in the spring of 2021, they were kind of the pioneers. It was dematerialized. It was the Fabricant, which we had on the cover of issue 3, and it's Artifact. So Artifact got kind of swooped up by Nike, swooshed up, and I feel like this is the what we're seeing is the sort of culmination of the history that you just described, Roland, and I would imagine the knowledge and sort of insights from Artifact. Erik, when you have looked at this, what have been the things that have stood out to you?
One thing that I thought was interesting, I'm definitely not a sneakerhead. I do follow that culture a bit. I think it's a mixture of cringe and interesting to me, how grown men are so obsessed by sneakers, but I still like sneakers, so I'm kind of hypocritical there. But anyways, I thought it was really interesting how I read in a Fast Company article about this .swoosh, and they said that Nike will use blockchain to share revenue on community sourced designs of these sneakers. And as they're sold and resold, things will, spread out, and it will be equally shared for everyone that was involved in a sneaker. And like Roland said, since the early 2000s, Nike have had a huge culture of making custom sneakers, either through Nike ID or they do it, by themselves at home, or there's knockoffs. For example, the Bape stuff. I don't know if you remember them. How the Bape didn't, and it was a big juridical shambles with Bape had to take the shoe off, and it was a big. I don't know how much they got sued for, but and they had to remove all of them, which make them a very big. If you own a pair of Bapes now, they're extremely valuable.
And Erik, actually, Virgil Abloh's success working with Nike was based on this culture of customizing Nikes.
Right.
Because if you actually look at his original designs, they are very much like this kind of personal customization of a Nike. That got
exactly.
scaled up,
and that could be quite messy sometimes when Nike, for example, we're talking about Nike now. They could be accused of stealing a small designer's work. Like, hey, I did this customized shoe 3 years ago. Now you dropped an official one. It looks quite similar, and then the whole culture starts talking and stuff. So I think this is a great way of seeing, like, okay, who designed it first, and then through crypto and through blockchain, you can kind of follow the design lead and see, oh, Nike picked it up here, and then we're going to share the money and share the revenue, and we can see who actually designed it. I think that's really interesting, especially when it comes to sneakers and street culture, where it's so much about knockoffs. It's so much about I thought of Dapper Dan, for example, who used to do these like really lavish and crazy Gucci and Louis Vuitton stuff out of his Harlem store. And that eventually led up to, that's a good example, it led up with Gucci hiring him and giving him a own atelier and then designing some of his stuff. But usually all this stuff just ends up with everyone being sued and everyone just not happy. So I think this is interesting.
But there is an element to that, Erik. It's the other side of it. It's the commercial side of it. So this is a fantastic way to collect consumer data. And by collecting and knowing what consumers want, of course, Nike can earn more money, right? So, big data management, whatever you want to call it, data analytics, all of this is, at the end of the day, it is to sell more product, right? But then
so explain that for me, Roland. And I feel like there's two ways into this. One is kind of the positive story of being community driven and inclusive, and have the Nike members, as they talk about, sort of participate in the design process and eventually get revenue from the work that they are actually doing. That's kind of the positive side of it. You're talking about kind of a bit of a flip side to that coin, which is, in sort of engaging the community, they're also learning about what the community wants, the direction it's headed in terms of designs, consumer behavior, and that sort of thing. That's what you're talking. Basically, kind of like a fashion version of Facebook.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me think about that comparison. But any company today needs data, needs to basically digest and understand data, translate data into actionable insights. And I think maybe your comparison to Facebook is interesting in the sense that why have the tech companies been so successful? Well, because they have data, right? And I think this is also why we see that Nike as a company, I think they have this head start to many other brands, because they have worked with Nike ID and other platforms for 20 years. And, they have collected data on what's the appetite among consumers to design their own sneakers, what do they design, all of these things, and then they can start to predict and forecast what might be successful designs in the future, etc. And I think with this community, and I'm not saying it's I love this idea, right? But I'm just also saying that it's an amazing way for Nike to collect even more data and to predict in an even better way what consumers want in the future. And I think this is still niche, right? We don't have any numbers besides what I shared earlier, the $200 million in revenues of NFT sales, etc. That's nothing. Nike is a big company. This is still a very, very small revenue stream for them, but it is at the cutting edge of consumer trends. So actually it is, it's an innovation experiment in real life, right? It's not something you talk about with PowerPoint slides. It's actually, you're doing it in real life. You're testing out new consumer behaviors, the appetite to co-create. You're testing co-creation and revenue and new revenue streams. In a quite I would say risk-free setting. Right. And then if this, let's say, fails, if it doesn't scale, let's say, if this still is just a niche experiment, and 2 years from now, they will quietly kind of shut it down and move on, they will still have collected huge amounts of data, which will then help them to understand consumer behavior. I must also say that this is important, that this, coming back to the crypto comment you made in the beginning, that this is a Polygon-based platform, and Polygon.
Explain what Polygon is for people who don't know.
So very, very shortly, Polygon is what you could call a layer 2 scaling solution for Ethereum. So it's basically a way to enjoy the benefits of Ethereum without these infamous gas fees.
Mm.
Right, so it's a blockchain network built on top of Ethereum, basically, to provide faster, cheaper Ethereum experience. So and this is extremely critical, because I think a lot of the criticism against crypto has been, for example, the gas fees.
Yeah.
And then of course the sustainability aspects, which Ethereum themselves kind of mended earlier this fall. But Polygon is also seen as a more sustainable option to working purely on Ethereum based.
I think
So yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning, and sort of the reason I'm excited about this, which I am, and we've talked before about sort of what is the transition into NFTs. I mean, because I think for a lot of people, if you're not like us kind of nerds into this, enjoy talking about it and reading up on it, it's very hard to it's been very hard to wrap your head around the sort of utility of NFTs. What are they good for, really? And especially since the first iteration, kind of first wave of NFTs, were these sort of crazy little Bored Ape cartoon figures that sold for millions of dollars. There's been funny memes around how much, Jason Bieber's Bored Ape, how much is worth now. He paid $1.5 million for it. Now it's worth nothing. Or similar like that. So I think for the general public, even people in the media industry or in the fashion industry, even in the tech industry, has been like raising their eyebrows, scratching their heads. What will this end up being? And is it the beginning of the next phase of the internet, meaning like the third wave of the internet? Is it just a fad? Or is it just like kind of like a digital receipt? It's a very interesting, good technology.
It's all, Konrad.
Well, we're going to get to that. But that's kind of my point here, because I think we've talked about how NFTs could be really good for luxury brands in authenticating the realness of a Louis Vuitton or a Chanel bag. But I think what we're seeing here with this .swoosh platform is that it kind of perfectly bridges the old Nike, which is still very community driven. It's collectibles. It's about designs that people are excited about and wants to talk about, online in forums and so forth, with this sort of new way of authenticating it on Web3, even creating digital versions of it instead of the physical ones. And I was at Slush 3 weeks ago when we had a podcast about that. So I listened to an old ad chief from Apple called James Vincent. Very interesting sort of branding figure. He said he runs a company called Founder, where he helps founders with communication and so forth. He's been working with Apple and also Airbnb and Snap. But he mentioned a story, and one of his takeaways was that Steve Jobs always said, don't introduce the new with the new. Introduce the new with the familiar. So meaning every time there's a new technology that needs to get sort of foothold in the general public, it can't be completely new. It can't be this whole new thing. So the through line, and maybe this is easy to say, after the fact, but had he created, had he come from computers directly to the phone, it would have been harder for people to swallow. But if he first introduced this little MP3 player, and MP3 players was around, so people knew what that was, they just introduced a better one, put that into every person's pocket. So now everyone has an Apple product in their pocket that's kind of like this mini computer, and then launched the phone. And even in the first phone, we could see that all the apps were kind of, the Notes app was kind of this skeuomorphic thing where it kind of looked like a notepad, and I assuming the podcast app was kind of like two wheels spinning or something. So introducing the new. Don't introduce the new with the new, introduce the new with the familiar. And that, to me, is what Swoosh is. It's like...
But this is my point, also connecting it back to the Nike ID platform that started 20 plus years ago. That this is not... It's just a continuation of a journey they have made for years and years. So I agree with you. And I think also NFT is not so new anymore. Sorry to say, but, time goes fast. We saw major NFT drops 2-3 years ago. And... so I think this is also...
But they're not widely adopted. They're not mainstream yet. And I think what we are waiting for is will they become mainstream? No one really knows, but I think this is a really good indication that, and it's a testament to that this could actually kind of work.
Yeah, and I
And they
think
are
the many
enabling
other.
it.
No, but listen, this is just one of many examples. I mean, you literally have every major sports brand working with NFTs, every major luxury brand working with NFTs. Instagram is launching, has already launched, in the US for a limited number of test users, the possibility to mint NFTs through the Instagram platform. I mean, it is coming, right? Whether we want it or not. And the reason it is going to scale, it is going to stick, is because of the blockchain technology and the data that can be collected as well, right? And and also this. I think this is just a byproduct of the last 10 years of, you could say, influencer economy as well. Like, you have had in the past decade, I mean, millions of consumers producing content, right? Producing, it's photography, illustration, art, cooking shows. I mean, whatever you want, sneaker designs, and they have shared it online, but there has not been a really good way to get revenues from this. But I mean, there are probably hundreds of millions of consumers that in some way or another are creating something, right, in the digital space. And of course, they want to earn something. So I think we have reached the tipping point. NFTs are here to stay. It's not going to be the Beeple stuff, the $69 million paintings, or not paintings, but artworks.
Art pieces, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be something else, but still, it's here to stay, I would say. One more element with .swoosh is, and I think we're repeating ourselves a bit, but I think it's important. It is the community element. Nike has, you talked about sneakerhead, Erik. I mean, Nike is part of a global community, multi-billion-dollar economy of sneakers, right? Which is built on identity. It's like, if I have this sneaker, this gives me social clout.
Yeah.
So of course, if consumers spend 20, 30, 40, 50, even more % online, they also want social clout online. And this is why I believe that virtual sneakers are successful.
So let's take that, stating that fact. Let's spend the last few minutes of this podcast talking about looking in the crystal ball a little bit and talking about how this could affect the industry. Because what you just said is sort of NFTs are here to stay. We're seeing project after project, and the reason we're excited about this and is because feels so sort of thought through. It's rooted in a culture and a community that actually exists. But how can other brands perhaps pick up on this? What will this mean for? I mean, Nike is one of the biggest brands in the world. I know you have in your day job, studied this quite a lot, talking about how your day job at Absolute, thinking about how, which is also a global brand, but perhaps not with the same size of Nike. But can we give a little bit of a through line here down to sort of other international brands? But also, I think it would be interesting to predict a little bit about when will this trickle down to perhaps a local fashion brand here in Scandinavia or another community here? What do you guys think?
Actually, I thought it was interesting. We put on our website on Wednesday, Mega, who was on the show, who took Roland's shoes the other week. She put a Parsons School of Design, the big fashion school, and Roblox made a huge report on metaverse and fashion in the metaverse, how people dress. And I thought it was interesting that it's kind of contradicting to what we've been talking about. Because we've been saying on this podcast, like, oh, you can dress as a cloud or a dragon. But the report actually showed that 70% of the 1,000 of Gen Zers that they surveyed, 70% stated that they dress their avatars somewhat like they do in real life.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
So that's a big majority. So that means that if you're a brand and you know that you have some kind of following, don't go over the top for your digital twins or digital copies. Make it look similar. So, like you said, what was that quote from the Apple guy? Introduce something new with something old, or whatever it was. I
Yeah.
think that's exactly that would be. I don't know. I'm not going to give brands advice, but from this report and from that quote, I
Maybe
think
you
it's
should,
interesting
Erik.
yeah,
Maybe you should
of
give
course.
brands advice.
We're making waves in this podcast, but actually, that's it. So 70% out of all these people that they surveyed, Parsons and Roblox, 70% say they want their avatar to look kind of like they do in real life. So don't go over the top when you design your stuff. Keep it simple.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you know, when we talk about these flying unicorns of Decentraland or whatever, I mean that is a very, very niche community, right? So I totally agree with you, and I think this is a great observation. And I also believe this is why we have seen Nike being so successful and other brands, you know, Gucci or others, because they have actually dropped somewhat, recognizable products. You know, a virtual sneaker or a virtual T-shirt. You know, you understand immediately what it is. I think though what is still something that I am struggling with in my own head is how you can use these virtual goods across multiple platforms.
Right.
So and maybe there is a super smart solution. Maybe I have just missed that. I have no idea, but I'm still struggling to understand. It's like if I purchase a virtual sneaker .swoosh or anywhere else, how can I then use that virtual sneaker as an extension of my identity across multiple social or digital platforms?
I mean, a lot of engineers are scratching their heads around this, and we are friends at Zoan in Finland, which I also visited and we talked about on the show. They have their own metaverse called Cornerstone Land, kind of a photorealistic metaverse, they call it. They have a sort of their own sort of virtual office, and you know, their day job is kind of helping. Their turnover, I think, is like €1 million on that metaverse, so they're making money off of it. But you know, they're a consultancy. They're helping brands all over the world creating virtual experiences. So what they say is the portability of this, how to transport digital goods between different platforms, is a head scratcher still. It's no one has the solution. I think that the sort of porting the NFT, sort of the NFT meaning sort of the proof that you have this design. I think that probably is as fairly simple way. I mean, it's just a piece of code. You can it's a link to the blockchain. I know I have this. The problem is when you've designed something in a 3D sneaker on the .swoosh platform, how do you get a version of that into Roblox, which is much more
Exactly.
pixelier? Even
Yeah,
though
that's the point.
my daughter informs me that, and she kind of complains that Roblox is looking more and more like real like, because and I think that's interesting because obviously they want to be spearheading the metaverse, and they're really going the direction of making the avatars look much more realistic and not these sort of Minecraft Lego type figures. But this is a big issue. I think the entire community is thinking about it. Every platform that comes out says we are working towards portability and so forth. I don't think anyone has solved it, and if they have, we should definitely bring it on the podcast.
Then I mean, this can be heavily debated. We will not have time, but if I try to look in the crystal ball, is this the starting point of a more sustainable way of consuming? Meaning that 20 years from now, consumption of physical goods will have declined and dropped.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, that
and then this is basically what we have replaced it. So, you know, we might spend maybe the majority of our money on virtual goods, because that's also we also spend a lot of time in virtual platforms or online, etc. And that's how we build our identity. But I mean, it's hard to know, right? But
but that's, I mean, we talked about that in the last episode on overproduction. That's a huge issue, and we kind of want it to happen. That's why we're kind of engaging in this so much at Scandinavian Mind, and when we run our conferences and talking about sort of the future of a more sustainable fashion industry. I think why this topic is very relevant for the .swoosh platform is that it at least it alludes to a future where a big brand that's big on physical goods, one of the biggest ones in the world, is, venturing into a digital space. So this has been my, I've had predictions, or at least an idea, or a kind of like at least a thought experiment, that what if brands like H&M and so forth, in their sort of product grid, because I believe what's happening when you're surfing the sort of the product grid on H&M's website, it's you're just junking on dopamine the way you are on Instagram and Facebook and so forth. You're looking at new clothes, new styles, new designs, new thinking about new ways of sort of enhancing or developing your identity. And I think a lot of that is happening in that moment. It's about the purchase moment. It's not about when the product comes home in a box with plastic covered and it has traveled across the world, and it just put a strain on carbon emissions and whatnot. And I believe I believe it's the legacy brands, it's the heritage brands, it's the brands that are big in the physical space that can actually make a mark. We've interviewed the digital ones, the dematerialized, the fabricants and so forth, but I definitely believe it's the legacy brands that should make a move into this, and I believe they can make money out of it. And that's what needs to happen, because I think H&M and any other fashion brand is super scared of this new digital space. One, because they kind of don't understand it. Nike shows that they do understand it, but also because they're afraid they're going to lose their revenue. And I think for that to be a future, what you just said, Roland, can this be a new sustainable way of doing it? If we solve the gas fees and everything else, it needs to be that we transfer revenue from goods that are physical, but that only kind of provides that dopamine hit and is about identity for the consumer. Can we transfer that into a digital space? I think we can gain a lot. And probably it's the generation that grows up now that are sort of 12, 11, 13. They're the ones that can have this sort of natural in themselves.
Yeah. And then if I look into my second crystal ball, this might also be the pivotal moment in consumption history where we move towards large-scale community-driven design, meaning that in the future, maybe even for the H&M of the future, maybe the majority of designs will be generated by the consumer themselves using H&M design tools. And then, the brands, they will continue to drop collaborations, designs that they have done, etc.
Right.
So I think that might be something we will see, at least in the more, let's say, fast-moving consumers goods sectors. Luxury is different, right? Because that whole mechanism is around collectability and the designer, the identity that the luxury brands are building. It's a different process, right? But I don't know. I see. I see this in my crystal ball. A future basically where a lot of brands will be design platforms for consumers.
All right, guys, let's leave it there. Brands will be a platform for their communities. I think that's definitely a direction brands should go. How it will unfold, we will keep a close eye on here on the Scandinavian Mind podcast. Let's just end with checking out some of the stories that are up online. Erik, you mentioned the new report from Roblox and Parsons. I think we wrote a fine little piece about that with our sort of 5 takeaways. And if you want to read the full report, you can find the link on our website. Erik, what else is happening online? There's also the rundown of fashion and gaming collabs, right?
Yes. On top of this, takeaways from the Roblox Parsons report, Mega has also written a list of our top 7 fashion and gaming collabs from the last year, varying from everything from luxury brands to street brands and having their own games and being injected into games. So check out.
This has been the Scandinavian Mind podcast. Don't forget to follow our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter and check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and our most important social media, actually, LinkedIn. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
See you.